Okay, so we've got, I think, the newest team member, and probably the one that has the most, in terms of both passion and purpose, that's going to have a little bit of conversation with us today about how it is we bring our purpose and our cause to Convergence. So to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is and what gets you up in the morning.
Coffee. So my name is Emily Browning, and my name is Emily Browning, and I'm actually from here in Louisville. I work by day at a local nonprofit called the Center for Women and Families. We're a domestic violence shelter and rape crisis center. So a little plug for them. It's good to know. And recently, I've been there for about 4 years, and in the last year, I transitioned from development into one of our grant programs working with teens around teen dating violence. So that's one thing. But by night, I've always been a freelance graphic designer. So that's kind of the other aspect of some of the things that I do. And the reason I even am
Shout out for the website.
which I'm so nitpicky, so many things I would keep doing to it, but I'll let it go. I'll take the compliment. Thank you. But the reason I'm even here today, this was something I'll say honestly a year ago I didn't know very much about at all, and I still have so much to learn. So excuse me if I don't use the right language around some of the technical terms. It's been enlightening.
We think we're using the right language, and it turns out we're not.
All right, good. But the reason I'm even here today is I just happened to go to a startup. There was a startup weekend here, and I originally was just going to network. I wasn't even going to pitch or do anything like that. But they needed more people to pitch, and so I was just thinking about problems that I have in my job working with teenagers. One of those is getting teenagers to know about the events and the things that we're doing. We have all these awesome things that we do in the community, but when you're with a nonprofit, the fact that there's not a lot of people involved, we're a small team trying to do big things, it's hard to get marketing or get things out there. And so I was trying to solve that problem of how do I get events or different things in one place, and not only just us, but all the other nonprofits. How do teens find us, see what we're doing, interact with us? How do we make it also just something they actually want to be able to come to? Because sometimes the nonprofits
is that like
be a little
Snapchat ready?
Corny, So yeah. So that was just, I had pitched an idea of just creating an app or a website, a space, kind of like meetup.com or Do502 that was just based around events that are teen friendly, because those are already geared towards adults. Anyway, from that, Andy just joined my team. He just kind of happened in on it. I never, had met him or knew anything about it before. And he was hearing what I was kind of saying about that and the ideas that I had. And then he just kind of blew my mind, basically, with all of these other things that he had ideas for that was connected to Convergence, the augmented reality app, Sarah, and the potential with that. And so from learning about that, we kind of came to this what we ended up pitching was kind of this meld of the two things that he was bringing to the table and what I was saying was a problem. And so from that, we came up with Sarah raising up nonprofit events along with the Sarah app is used to using gaming and augmented reality to bring the public to different locations, whether that's that could be a Dave & Buster's or another place like that. How do you utilize gaming to get them there? So how do we also use that to help get teenagers or other people to the things that nonprofits are putting on as well? Because we're usually left out of that space. Businesses get to publicize or market or do things in ways that nonprofits often don't because we don't have the resources. So how do we raise both of those things up at the same time?
Gamifying the communication.
I think your mic.
Yeah, that one works. Okay, so gamifying the communication and making it so that it's both relevant to youth as well as to other nonprofits. And taking some of what we might be building inside of Convergence and doing good with it.
Right, so I think on a bigger level, that was just a starting point of how I even got on board, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. And from there, I was able to use some of my graphic design stuff to help out along the way, too. And at the end of the day, if Andy needs something, and he just, hey, can you do this? And if I can, I'll say yes and kind of go with that.
Andy is a bit of a recruiter.
He brings everybody to the table, and that's, that's a really good thing. But from that, it's just really opened my eyes to the fact that that was just a small thing, but really just the need as you're creating this community, as the more I've learned about convergence even and seeing how we're creating something from the ground up, and here we are right at the precipice of that, that any time that we are creating a community, that it's so important that social good and social responsibility is there from the start, and that becomes the standard. How do you make social good and social responsibility the standard?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because so many causes and so many different projects will try to bolt on social good in order to get that tick box done, but if you really come in authentically and make it a part of it, not everybody may agree on what the right purpose is, the right cause. And I know I've done a lot of work in charity of choice for people who want to give, but they may not want to give to the charity I think they should give to.
Exactly, it's matchmaking.
So it's matchmaking, and it's also finding that in each of the games, what really resonates with that community.
Right, there's no one size fits all, and I think that's the beauty of the potential of this project as well, is that, you know, whatever social good looks like, it doesn't have to look exactly the same for every person coming to the table.
Right.
You know, that could look like, for some, that might be just the development side of it, raising funds for another charity. So if, I know that World of Warcraft did this by creating, I think it was a fox that you could purchase in game that became like your companion, and all of the funds, they raised $1.8 million for disaster relief. So, you know, that's one aspect, whether it's supporting through, you know, financial, but then there are other ways that you can do things as well. So if that doesn't feel like the right fit, maybe if you aren't ready to give up resources financially yet because you're a small developer and, you know, that's not part of it, maybe it's connecting, mental health is something that's really important to the people that are on your team, and so maybe looking into in your game, utilizing AI, which is what Jennifer Grayson gave a wonderful talk about, but how do we maybe even utilize AI to start recognizing triggers or certain words or phrases that maybe someone is on the path to something, you know, maybe they're possibly suicidal or bullied or different things, like to pick up on that. And maybe it's just simply a little notification that pops up in the screen that's just like, hey, how are you doing today? Here are some resources if you were feeling this way. So that's another thing that could just be built into something that's simple, but is another way that you can incorporate social good. And that could look different.
So building a community
ways.
with a conscience in a way, as well as a sensitivity to each other. I mean, obviously, gamers have not necessarily a bad rap, but a bad behavioral process in many cases when you look at how much it takes to actually eradicate from, like, League of Legends and what Dota 2 and some of these other games have had to do in order to get those bad actors and that bad behavior taken out.
Right.
But by replacing it not just with, you know, gee, be nice to each other, but here's how to make a difference.
Well, and prevention as well.
Right.
That's a really big buzzword right now in nonprofits, and I deal with this in another aspect, but I think it's completely relevant to this, is, you know, I work at a domestic violence shelter where we're dealing with crisis. We're dealing with, once something has already happened, we're providing shelter, or providing services. But something we talk about all the time, and I think is completely relevant here too, is that the way to end the cycle of violence is actually prevention. It's starting early. And I think that's where you can get into those kind of things, like how do we start recognizing signs or different things that can lead to maybe it's bullying or different aspects, those what we now consider what would be a bad actor in this community. How do we get to that their emotional well-being way before those things happen? So there's so much potential to even change. If we're thinking about a virtual community, you know, in the same way that we think about our community here today, how do we incorporate prevention into that and keep that from even happening? And that improves the user base of any game or develop if you are able to go ahead, ahead of that.
I remember when Penny Arcade first put their children's hospital drive on, and all of a sudden parents saw that their kids were actually being some of the biggest donors on the planet for children's hospitals. And all of a sudden, well, gaming maybe it isn't quite so bad if if it can do some good. But I think that that's kind of the reverse of what you're saying. You're saying, what if we start from the very beginning, knowing we can do good,
Yeah.
and not be a surprise, but make it fit for each of the different franchises and experiences and communities that are being built. So that just means taking a look at this bigger picture and figuring out how to tap into a network of give backs and a methodology where our token can be something that people are investing into humans right around themselves.
Exactly. I think even just from my position here today, it's just also to challenge, everybody in the room in whatever capacity. I know, Bruce spoke about what he's passionate about and veterans, but it's just for everybody that challenge to consider, maybe I can't give in this way or do in this way, but how do we just make that something that we are continually looking at, incorporating social good and incorporating and bringing nonprofits to the table and raising them up along with us.
I heard this the other day, and it resonated with me, that especially this new generation, they're not waiting to go make their money and then do something philanthropic. They want there to be cause and purpose in the things that they do, and money isn't the motivation that they're looking at. It's not nearly the consumerism that has been the watchword of my generation. It's much more about making a difference. And I think especially when we look at potentially how short of a lifespan our Earth could possibly have, there's a whole lot we can do to give back to the planet. There's a lot we can give back to people. How is it you think we should potentially look at just making that a part of everything that we do?
I think it becomes a mindset. I think that it becomes, in the same way that you all are saying that with convergence, in the same way we've talked about by being on one shared platform, everyone is raised up together, that is really the true, that everybody benefits this because we're all becoming a part of it. I think that the big part of that is also saying that by incorporating social good and raising that up with it as well, that is something that it feeds. It becomes the cycle that it raises itself up at the same time. And so I'll take a drink of water.
Yeah, well, sorry.
Mini break here for a mint and water.
I think I found something I didn't want to have.
But I also, I'm going to go a step further. I think that the potential, so I'm going to go back to the prevention thing for a second really quick, because we've really, in this reality, we've really talked about with nonprofit and the potential to do prevention and change things ahead of time, and the impacts of, what if we could completely do away, it seems like a lofty goal, but what if domestic violence or, sexual violence or any of that stuff was not even a thing because we work so hard at preventing it early. And if you break that cycle, but
Bill Gates is trying to get rid of disease. So
exactly,
it's
So
not like
in that same way, how do we incorporate, if we bring our mindset even higher up, and here we are at the start of this world, this community of what convergence and Silicon Nexus is, if we start there and we build into that, whatever that looks like in a process of incorporating ways to incorporate prevention and raising up nonprofits and services, how would that impact not only the community that is within convergence, but those are all real people that are in there. How does that impact the real
these are
world?
things that are quantifiable. And earlier we talked about within our funds gamifying, making a difference, right?
Yeah,
that would be one of the metrics by which they would be determined whether the crowd is being more effective or the managed funds. What are some of the things you think we can do to measure impact and giving back and having a purpose?
Well, I think that would look different for the different parts of it. Obviously it's easy to measure raising funds for nonprofits and how that comes
Now we're back
around.
to money again.
Right. But on the other side of it too, there's so many, I know in just my day-to-day, we measure things just through, user like in the same way user experience in the game world, we also do that in the real. We do surveys and different ways to gather the data on the effects of the work that we're doing in this community as a nonprofit. So whether that's through surveys or just even seeing a decrease in violence in an area based off of things that we're doing. But I think that looks like that in this world as well, is how do we measure user experience if the games or the different parts are are the users coming out of that better in a way?
Right.
Their
Well,
emotional reaction to things
I mean,
that they're doing.
probably a circular reasoning here, but I think we also go back, in my mind, to the community itself and find out how they want to make it measured. And
Yeah,
make sure that we're
exactly, yeah.
aligning ourselves with their values and their
Yeah.
goals. Because I think if we try to do it for somebody rather than it being something that they're doing to build the community they want,
Right.
then it's imposed rather than authentic. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate all the thought and perspective you bring to this, and actually excited to have you be at the very foundation of what we're doing here, building that purpose into what we're all about at Convergence. Thank you. And I realize I'm really bad at keeping my own time while I'm doing my own interview, but I think we've hit our time. So next up,